I lied on my resume and now I'm training the real expert. That's the kind of sentence that doesn't hit you all at once. It unravels slowly, like, oh, cute fib, turning into existential crisis. I'm Dana Lee, 29, recovering perfectionist, and living proof that a two-sentence exaggeration can snowball into an entire alternate identity. It started innocently enough, if you define innocent as technically fraud, but said with good posture. I'd been unemployed for 3 months after my startup downsized everyone under 30 who didn't code or meditate professionally. My savings were evaporating, and the job postings sounded like impossible fantasy quests. Must have mastered 7 software suites and interpersonal alchemy. Then, one night, I stumbled across the listing. Marketing analyst, Horizon Bridge Consulting. Entry mid-level, hybrid schedule, great benefits. I ticked every box except one. Expert in Pivot Pro Analytics. Pivot Pro, for the blissfully uninformed, is a data visualization tool beloved by people who consider spreadsheets erotic. I used it once in grad school, mangled a chart, and immediately defected to Excel. Still, expert sounded like something you could Google overnight, right? I spent 3 caffeine-soaked evenings watching tutorials and confidently added proficient in Pivot Pro to my resume. Proficient looked modest. Nobody would demand proof. 2 weeks later, HR called. We were impressed by your extensive experience with Pivot Pro. Extensive? I almost corrected her, then heard my Rhett whisper from the corner. Yes, I said brightly. I love Pivot Pro. We're migrating all our clients' dashboards. We needed an in-house champion. Luckily, we found you. I went home that night performing an Olympic routine of panic. Google results blurred, YouTube tutorials droned like white noise. I took handwritten notes titled Fake Confidence Agenda and color-coded them by how likely each skill was to implode during a live demo. By Monday, I could fake half the commands and pronounce the rest with plausible authority. Remember, I told myself, most people just need you to sound 20% smarter than them. Amazingly, the first week went fine. I memorized sample datasets, spoke fast, and gestured a lot. Co-workers nodded enthusiastically. Carl called me the Pivot Pro guru. Each compliment made the lie heavier, like someone stacking metals made of lead. I promised myself I'd genuinely learn everything soon enough. Then it wouldn't be lying, just premature bragging. Then came the email that detonated my tranquil fraud. Hi, Dana. We just hired an external consultant to accelerate adoption. She's the original developer of Pivot Pro's visualization module. She'll shadow your sessions so we align our methods. I'm sure you two will hit it off. Attached was her bio. Dr. Elise Barton, lead analyst, Pivot Pro Labs. I read it twice while my stomach performed interpretive dance. I was now officially the imposter assigned to teach the inventor her own invention. The day she arrived, the office buzzed like an insect colony anticipating drama. Elise was maybe late 30s, calm, wearing a simple gray suit and the air of someone who automatically knows which graph belongs in a Nobel speech. Carl introduced us. Dana, meet our external expert. Elise will learn your training approach so we can standardize. I stretched my face into a smile. Of course, collaborative learning, it's the best way to grow. Her handshake was worn, her eyes kind, which somehow made it worse. I'm eager to see how someone newer approaches it, she said. Newer, not faker, newer. I could work with that. The session began. I clicked through slides, performing an out-of-body pantomime of professionalism, while Elise watched politely from the front row. My voice found an almost comedic clarity born of survival instinct. So, if we adjust our pivot hierarchies, we can visualize category trends in real time. My cursor hovered over random buttons until sheer luck produced a beautiful chart. Internally, I thanked every deity of accidental success. Elise leaned forward. Interesting shortcut, she said. Could you show that step again? Time froze. I had no idea what I'd done. My palms slicked. Absolutely. I chirped and repeated something adjacent to the previous chaos. Miraculously, it worked again. Different output, but colorful enough to distract. She nodded thoughtfully. Innovative use of conditional metrics. Innovative? Sure, that was one word for it. When the session ended, people clapped. I wanted to evaporate. Elise approached, expression unreadable. "You've got a talent for simplifying complex tools," she said. "Maybe we could co-teach tomorrow? Compare techniques?" And then my soul left my body, filed for unemployment, and hovered in the corner, screaming. I agreed anyway because saying no would expose me faster than bad Wi-Fi during a webinar. And that night, I studied like a fugitive cramming for Judgment Day. Forums, manuals, even a paid course. I burned through half a paycheck seeking redemption via knowledge. By sunrise, I actually understood a frightening amount about Pivot Pro, maybe not expert level, but enough that the software finally felt less like hieroglyphs and more like English. Day 2 arrived. Elise joined me up front. "Why don't you start?" she suggested. My fingers steadied on the keyboard. I demonstrated data simulations using real examples, explaining logic I'd actually learned hours earlier. When she added her piece, more precise, more advanced, I followed seamlessly, translating her jargon for the team. By the end of the session, something weird happened. We both looked impressed with each other. She leaned over afterward. "You know," she said quietly, "I've met plenty of experts, but very few teach with your clarity. Where did you learn?" And that's where the panic came roaring back, because the truth was poised on my tongue, demanding air. My lie had lasted barely 2 weeks, and now the woman who literally built the software was complimenting skills I'd faked into existence. I took a breath, still not sure which version of courage I was about to use, confessing everything, or doubling down until I earned the title I'd stolen. The answer, and everything that came after, belongs to the next part of this story. I stood there in front of Elise, my laptop still glowing with the last chart on the screen. Her praise hanging in the air like a balloon I wasn't sure I deserved to catch. "You're kind," I managed, trying to smile while my stomach did full Olympics. "I've had a lot of practice explaining things quickly." She tilted her head the way a scientist does when she's cataloging an interesting organism. Practice is the real teacher. Flair is just decoration. Then she packed her tablet calmly and said, "Tomorrow, let's switch. You run the lab at my terminal while I ask the questions. It'll be fun." Fun. My deceit was apparently about to take a practical exam. When she left, Carl appeared in the doorway, grinning like a proud parent. "See, you two are a dream team. Maybe run the session for our new international hires next week. Elise says your technique is refreshing." I stared at him, words jammed between panic and politeness. "Sure," I said eventually, and as soon as he turned, I dropped into my chair, forehead resting on the cool laminate desk. That evening, my apartment looked like a conspiracy bunker. Notebooks, scribbled diagrams, half-finished mugs of tea, and 12 tabs of Pivot Pro forums. I replayed every moment of our training, analyzing which parts were luck and which were actual understanding. It was time to erase the bluff completely, or crash spectacularly. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, a weird clarity came over me. Exhaustion disguised as enlightenment. I'd been terrified not because I couldn't learn, but because I thought admitting ignorance would prove everyone else right about me. The truth was, I had learned, faster, maybe hungrier than anyone else. The only counterfeit part was the timeline. When I showed up next morning, Elise was already rewriting code on the projector, like she was tuning a violin. She smiled when she saw me. "Ready for round 2? "Sort of," I admitted, and logged in. The entire department had gathered, thankfully more interested in bagels than my existential crisis. Elise hit record on the session, and suddenly, it was just us and the humming projector light. She began firing rapid-fire prompts. "Reverse the axis here. Now collapse those nodes. Build a filter by quarter. My fingers kept pace, inch by inch. Each correct output gave me another breath until something amazing happened. I wasn't pretending anymore. Pivot Pro moved how my hands expected it to. Halfway through, she muttered, "You modified the default behavior of this chart yesterday. How?" I explained, quickly, nervously, and she laughed in delight. "I never thought of that. You forced the subtotals to render as independent series. That's clever. Do you teach math?" "No, just desperation," I blurted before thinking. The room chuckled. Elise frowned with amused confusion. At lunch, she invited me to eat together. Between bites of salad, she said quietly, "You're quick, but something in your eyes tells me you're fighting guilt, not stage fright. You could have blown the second session, but you didn't." "Why?" I swallowed hard. "Because I decided this time to actually be the person my resume described." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean this time?" Here it was, the fork in the narrative. Continue the heroic imposter saga, or dig up what honesty I still owned? I took a breath that sounded more like a confession than a sigh. When I applied, I barely knew Pivot Pro. I exaggerated. Then they told me I'd be training others, and I panicked. Last week I met you, and I realized the only way not to drown was to learn until the lie caught up with the truth. Elise didn't react right away. The pause stretched like elastic. Then she exhaled, slow and thoughtful. "That explains the 2 a.m. emails I saw in the log files," she said lightly. I nearly choked on my coffee. "You're what?" She grinned. "Developers get alerts when someone accesses the advanced tutorial archive. Your account was in there almost every night. Honestly, I suspected you were catching up, maybe even pretending. But pretending isn't the same as cheating if you do the work after. You learned. Now you know it better than half the staff." I blinked. "So, you're not firing me?" "I don't even work for you," she said, laughing. "And I'd never punish curiosity. But you should tell Carl before rumor finds a louder microphone." The rest of the day blurred. Back at my desk, I drafted a resignation email 3 times and deleted each one. Around 5 o'clock, I marched to Carl's office, armed with the same adrenaline that had fueled all my terrible decisions so far. He was talking on the phone about budgets, gestured me in. Finished the call and asked, "Everything good with training?" "Mostly," I said. My mouth went dry. "There's something I need to admit before it becomes gossip. I wasn't exactly an expert when you hired me." He raised an eyebrow. "Define exactly." "I overstated my Pivot Pro experience. I knew the basics, but not the advanced tools. By the time you asked me to train, it was too late to back out. I spent every night learning for real." He stared at me, then at the window, then back. Finally, he chuckled. "Dana, do you know how many people fake their way in here and don't bother learning afterward? You panicked, sure, but you delivered. Elise practically wrote me a fan letter about you. Maybe next time just tell me you need a little ramp-up time." "So, you're not going to fire my best accidental analyst?" "No, but I will ask you to run a proper workshop once the guilt cools down." He smiled. "Maybe call it Crash Course Honesty, How I Learned Fast." I left his office half relieved, half wrecked. The lie was exposed but weirdly tolerated, like a pet spider people agree not to mention. It was over, but also not, because the final surprise came a week later during an email from Elise with subject job offer. She wanted me to join her research team at Pivot Pro Labs, teaching interface design to new engineers. "Someone who learns at panic speed," she wrote, "makes a great educator." Standing there rereading her note, I realized the universe has a sense of humor. The woman I'd accidentally tried to deceive now wanted to pay me to teach honesty through competence. The day I accepted, I deleted proficient in Pivot Pro from my resume and typed something truer, fluent in learning fast when cornered. As strange as it sounds, that single edit felt like graduating from survival to something almost admirable. a new kind of expertise no software could ever automate. 2 months later, the world looked suspiciously stable again. Steady paychecks, kinder sleep, no nightly cramming sessions lit by quiet panic. The imposter version of my life had been replaced by something almost credible. I was officially working with Elise's team at Pivot Pro Labs, teaching the same system that used to make me want to hide under desks. The move from Horizon Bridge to the new role felt like stepping out of a lie and into an inside joke that the universe had written for me. My first day, Elise introduced me to a room full of engineers with the casual authority of someone who builds tools people rely on. "This," she said, clapping me on the shoulder, "is Dana Lee, our newest instructor consultant. She learned Pivot Pro the hard way, which is probably the only real way. She's going to help us make the documentation make sense to actual humans." There was a polite smattering of applause. I wished I could print her phrasing on a business card. Learned the hard way. It was the most honest title I'd ever had. The first weeks were equal parts exhilarating and humbling. Elise's team spoke a dialect of math that I still needed subtitles for. But something in my mess of a learning process turned out to be valuable. They liked how I translated code into metaphors and diagrams instead of instructions. People started coming to me with questions not because I was flawless, but because I explained how to fail safely. Somehow, that made me an expert in a way I could actually live with. One afternoon, after a training session for a group of new hires, Elise stopped by my office. "How does it feel?" she asked, "teaching people who'll probably never lie about their resumes?" I laughed. "Liberating mostly, embarrassing occasionally." She perched on the edge of my desk. "You know, our system logs your teaching examples for template design. Some of your demonstrations are weirdly brilliant. Would you mind reviewing them for inclusion in the next user guide?" That sentence would have terrified old Dana. This version simply asked, "When do you need them?" Later that night, sitting alone in the lab's soft hum, I opened the demo files one by one. The same datasets I'd once used to bluff, now annotated with real explanations. Between the formulas and screenshots, I saw a timeline of chaos evolving into competence. I realized there was nothing to be ashamed of. Panic had simply been an unorthodox teacher. An email notification pinged. It was from Carl, my old boss at Horizon Bridge. "Congrats. Heard you're at the source now. Remember us when you're famous." He'd attached a GIF of a fire being extinguished with the caption, "Crisis Management Level Expert." I laughed so loudly, someone from accounting stuck their head in to check if I was okay. I drafted a reply. "Thanks, Carl." Turns out, confession beats perfection every time. The next morning, Pivot Pro Labs held its quarterly meeting. Elise summarized new research, then handed me the microphone. "And to wrap up," she said, "Dana will demo how we simplified onboarding." Standing there in front of 50 engineers, I remembered the day I'd first faked a demo, finger trembling over a button I didn't understand. Now I opened the same program from muscle memory and spoke without notes. My hands moved confidently across the keyboard, explaining not just what I was doing, but how wrong I'd once been and what I'd learned from it. People nodded, some even chuckled at the self-deprecating jokes. When the last chart rendered perfectly, applause filled the room. Not the polite kind, but the genuine relieved sound of people recognizing effort. Elise squeezed my shoulder. "See? Nobody here cares about the initial lie anymore. They care about the transformation." Transformation. That word lingered like a badge more impressive than expert. Months later, when annual reviews rolled around, my performance summary contained exactly 3 words, written in Elise's sharp handwriting. "Learns without fear." It was the neatest forgery the universe had ever corrected on my behalf. That evening, I went home, poured a glass of wine, and opened my old resume. The phrase "proficient in Pivot Pro" still glared at me from an old backup copy on my hard drive. Instead of deleting it, I added a footnote. "Proficiency, eventually acquired under extreme psychological duress, highly recommended for character development." I hit save, laughed, and closed the laptop. Bean, my neighbor's golden retriever, who visits when I work late, thumped her tail against the couch, a living reminder that honesty, like dogs and debugging, always requires patience and the occasional mess. Maybe someday I'll tell future trainees about that lie, how it nearly suffocated me and then accidentally rewrote my career. Not as a warning exactly, but as a curious piece of evidence. That sometimes the road to real expertise begins with panic, continues through humility, and ends, finally, in laughter that you can breathe through.